If you're a football fan on social media, then you've almost certainly encountered a post, tweet or article about the subject of today's video. Will Still is one of us, a football manager addict who just happens to also be the manager of Stade de Reims in Ligue 1. We're all very familiar with the idea of an FM wonder kid, the young prodigious talents that make their way from our computer screens to the real life stadiums and supporters' hearts every season. In recent seasons, we've seen players like Yusuf Moukoko and Erling Haaland make the leap from computer game legend to real life superstar. But this season, it isn't just the players that are making waves in the real footballing world. 30-year-old Will Still is a self-confessed football manager superfan and credits some of his success to the hours he spent playing the game with his brother, progressing from Championship Manager to the most recent Football Manager titles. Still openly admits in interviews that he'd stay up until 4 AM playing Football Manager in his teens.
He said, obviously I've spent hours playing it because, well, pretty much everyone has. And you smash the space bar until about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Born and bred in Belgium to English parents, Will returned to England, getting his first taste of the non-playing side of football during his college studies. After accepting he wouldn't turn pro as a player, he quickly figured out that coaching was the closest he would get to the buzz of playing the game, and threw himself into the real-life Football Manager experience. He began his coaching journey at Preston North End as the manager of their under-14s, whilst completing his apprenticeship as part of his studies at Myerscough College. Returning to Belgium, Still quite literally went around the grounds, knocking on doors and offering his help to any club he could find, eventually returning to Sint-Truiden in the Belgium 2nd Division, the team he had played academy football for. Yannick Ferreira, the then manager of Sint-Truiden, sent Will to film and analyse a game, eventually giving him an unpaid apprenticeship with the club after he impressed with his knowledge. Will worked his way up from a video analyst to an almost de facto assistant manager, becoming more and more involved on the training pitch as time went on. From here, he would follow Ferreira to Standard Liège, before joining Belgium's 2nd Division team Liège in a role as a video analyst and assistant to manager Frederik van der Beest. He did have a bizarre 2-day spell back at Standard Liège in June 2017 before returning to Liège again. It was here that Still was thrust into the top job, as with van der Beest sacked in October, a 24-year-old Will Still was installed as caretaker manager. He'd gone from football manager player to football manager. The remainder of his Liège season was impressive and led to him being officially appointed manager on a full-time basis. He led the club on a 7-game unbeaten run and amassed 21 points out of 27. However, his inexperience would deem him unable to continue in the role, as he lacked the UEFA A-level coach degree, which is required in the Belgian 1st Division B to remain in charge for more than 60 days. Because of this, he would fall back into an assistant manager role to a new boss, David Colpert. His next move would be to Beerschot as assistant to Stijn Vreven and subsequently Hernan Losado. Losado, with the support of Still, would lead Beerschot to promotion to the 1st Division A, and when Losado departed, Still landed the top job, manager at Beerschot. After Beerschot, who he guided to a mid-table finish, Still headed to France, taking up his role as assistant manager to Oscar Garcia at Stade de Reims. After 4 months in France, Still returned to Belgium once again with Standard Liège, explaining that he needed to be back in Belgium to continue studying for his coaching badges. At the end of the 2021-22 season, Still got a call back from Reims to go back to the Ligue 1 side as an assistant manager. After Oscar Garcia was sacked as manager on the 13th of October 2022, Still took over as caretaker manager. Incredibly, he still doesn't have his pro license, so Reims are being fined £22,000 for every game he takes charge of. I doubt they're complaining though. With Still's energetic 4-2-3-1 system picking up positive results, the club decided to extend his contract from a 6-game challenge of get as many points as you can before the World Cup to keeping the faith with the young manager until at least the end of the season. At the time of recording, Will Still's Reims side still haven't lost a league game under his management, recently fighting out a dramatic last gasp draw with PSG to push into 11th spot in the Ligue 1 table. Clearly, Will Still possesses a brilliant footballing mind, and one that's been moulded, at least in part, by FM. But how do his tactics translate into real life? When he took over from Oscar Garcia at Stade de Reims, Still switched an ineffective 5-3-2 system for a 4-2-3-1. Classic, right? Seriously, this writes itself. His 4-2-3-1 focused on making the most of the players available to him, with well-drilled, well-coached principles of play, making it easier for his players to carry out his instructions. The shift in tactics has been an uncomfortable one for Ligue 1 teams, with Reims pressing aggressively in transition and becoming a more dangerous and effective attacking side. Still's 4-2-3-1 system often looks to go long from the goalkeeper, stretching opposition defences high and wide and creating space in central areas to overload the opponent. Key to this are the two central midfielders who drop into the half space and drag their markers with them, leaving space for the wingers to operate in. Creating a double pivot here to progress the ball opens up two options, either through central progression into the striker or longer passes from the centre-backs to set the wingers free behind the opposition defence. Still's Reims team often opt for the wide route to minimise the risk of losing possession centrally, which serves two functions: increases ball retention generally, but also makes it easier to counter-press if possession is lost, with the opposition often pressed against the touchline with less escape routes available. In the final third, Reims bring the fullbacks high up the pitch, allowing the wide midfielders the flexibility to cut inside and attack the box, while still having the scope to recycle the ball and move defences laterally with switches of play. The two defensive midfielders hold deep and balance the play, with one fullback, usually the one on the opposite side to the ball, also tucking in and sitting deep to form a midfield three, helping to protect against counter-attacks whilst also giving the attack space to work with. While Reims regularly commit 5 to 6 players around the box in attack, this is often an advantage to them in transition, as they generate a numerical advantage over the recovering defenders, enabling them to crowd around the ball carrier, either slowing them down or winning the ball back early. It's classic counter-pressing football. However, where Will Still's defensive setup is different is in the shape his team transition to. We often see teams counter-press and then revert to their normal shape, Klopp's Liverpool defending in a 4-3-3 for example. However, while the Reims attack pressure the opposition to force a mistake, their teammates organise into a more compact 4-4-2 shape in the defensive phase. In the 4-4-2 shape, Still's goal is to prevent the opposition from playing through the middle of the pitch, forcing them wide and enabling his team to use the touchline as a defender and force turnovers of possession in wide areas, where they can quickly release the pace of their wingers and forwards on the counter. If that turnover of possession doesn't happen early in transition, Reims tighten up the lines, closing out the space their opponents have to play in and become difficult to break down, especially in those central areas. By using two strikers up front, Reims force their opponents to build out from the back into wide areas, sealing off the midfield pivots and again looking to use that wide space as their hunting ground. It's a system which has proven effective, with Reims only conceding 2 goals in Still's first 5 games and only 7 goals total since Still took over at the club. With the unbeaten streak extending further with a convincing 4-2 win over Lorient, the 22 grand per game that Reims are paying for him not having his UEFA Pro licence probably doesn't feel too expensive, especially on the nights where they're scoring 90th minute equalisers against PSG and moving closer to a return to European football than they are towards the relegation zone. For Football Manager fanatic Will Still, this feels like the start of a brilliant and remarkable football management career, one in which he admits to wanting to go and manage his beloved West Ham one day. I'm thinking England, boss, to be honest. He seems like right now, though, he's living the absolute dream for any Football Manager player.